Welcome to another Infographic Instant with your host Brian Michael. In this infographic we're going to be looking at whether it's in Hong Kong's financial interest to help the mainland fight corruption. This infographic is part of a larger paper looking at the question of whether the ICAC should help mainland authorities to fight corruption. And we focus on the legal issues, primarily legal issues involved with measures Hong Kong government can take to help reduce corruption on the mainland. So we don't focus on China's own fight against corruption. Instead, we look at that very marginal piece of the puzzle, namely, what is Hong Kong's potential participation in corruption, and what activities can we do domestically in order to reduce that corruption. Now, turning our attention to the infographic you see in front of you, we're looking at what's known as financial incentive compatibility for the Hong Kong government to engage in the fight against corruption on the mainland. Stepping back a moment, there's two major tests or major criteria that need to be filled in order for a government to undertake activity if you are a new institutional economist. In other words, we believe that governments are run primarily by self-interest, and therefore they look at two things: their own financial interests, as represented by taxes they can collect, and second, their political interests, as represented by the number of votes a particular policy can garner if the politicians decide to support that policy. In this infographic, we're going to be looking at financial incentive compatibility, and in a subsequent infographic, we're going to be looking at political incentive compatibility. So, turning our attention now to the figure, what we do is we try and model how much tax revenue, extra tax revenue, Hong Kong government will collect if they allocate more resources to the ICAC in order to step up mutual legal assistance in fighting corruption on the mainland. So for relatively low levels of ICAC spending, this yields particularly low amount of revenue, trade-related revenue in particular, whereas for higher levels of spending, we see higher but marginally decreasing amounts of tax revenue. Now, the mechanism by which the tax revenue is collected is in the paper. However, to give you an overview of that mechanism, we can see the main causal mechanism through trade. So, to take a practical example, imagine that Hong Kong businessmen go to Shanxi province, where they trade, where they have goods. They sell those goods to mainland businessmen in exchange for money. Now, in this hypothetical example, they might be asked for bribes. Now, their participation in corruption can lead to either increased business or decreased business, depending on whether the amount of bribery helps them divert trade or whether it helps to create trade. And all throughout the paper, we make this dichotomy between a trade effect or an income effect, and on the other hand, a substitution or diversion effect. So when we look at the effect of this trade, bribery, and tax revenue, we look to see how much bribery contributes to increased Hong Kong trade with the mainland. And then, as a second step, we have to look at how much of that trade can be taxed back home in Hong Kong. So, to the extent that ICAC spending can help Hong Kong businessmen reduce bribes paid while simultaneously increasing taxable trade, that will then yield higher tax revenue. So, given the assumptions in our model, we see that increased ICAC spending does increase tax revenue, primarily through the trade channel here in Hong Kong. So with that, that's another Infographic Instant by Brian Michael.